Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 14th of July, 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So here it is, the official announcement of the StarkNet token. Obviously I spoke about this the other day and how it was basically confirmed by Suzu on Twitter and all the drama surrounding that. But now StarkWare has put out 3 separate blog posts basically confirming the token, kind of like the distribution of it, how it's going to work and everything like that. I've gone through all the blog posts. I do want to kind of give my opinion on this kind of from a high level. I have a lot of thoughts actually here, and I talked about it a bit in the Daily Gwei Discord channel. But I'm going to start by saying that I think I'm pretty disappointed here. I'm disappointed for a number of reasons. First reason is because the distribution is really bad. Like, this is the distribution. You can see it on my chart in front of me. There is about 49% of the tokens going to StarkWare investors and core contributors. StarkWare investors is 17%, core contributors is 32.9%, and then there is 51%, I think, going to the actual foundation, and then it will be distributed to the kind of parties you see on the right of the pie chart here. And doesn't seem to be anything on airdrops. They did kind of like say that there'll probably be an airdrop later, probably next year or something like that. But yeah, just overall, this distribution looks very centralized to me. It doesn't really look like it lends itself to a protocol decentralizing. It looks like it lends itself to the community actually getting upset over this distribution as well, which is always bad for an early stage project, in my opinion, anyway. But yeah, that's the first thing that I take a pretty big issue with, is that this token distribution doesn't look great at all. I mean, honestly, like basically 50% to insiders is pretty crazy. Especially for something like StarkNet, which is trying to be like, it's a layer 2, right? It's not like an app or anything like that. It's trying to be a generalized layer 2 platform for people to kind of like use, build on, like an Optimism or an Arbitrum or a Polygon or whatever it is, right? So from that perspective, having such a concentrated supply is really, really bad in my eyes. And you know, I've said this about alternative layer 1s plenty of times. They have pretty bad displays. They have pretty bad distributions generally as well. And I'm not going to forgive layer 2s for having bad distributions just because they're layer 2s. I'm going to just give my honest opinion here. My honest opinion is that I'm just not a fan of the distribution at all here. The second thing, a major thing that I'm not a fan of as well, is that the StarkNet token, while obviously being a governance token and a staking token, is also going to be used for paying fees on StarkNet. Now, I think they're going to have an option for people to pay fees in ETH as well, but it'll just be abstracted away, and you can pay ETH, and then which is kind of like paying StarkNet tokens to the, I think, the validators or to the kind of like stakers, and then obviously whatever layer 1 security fees that they kind of incur will need to be paid in ETH. Like, they can't get around that. So just to clear up any confusion there, just because the fee token on layer 2 would be the StarkNet token doesn't mean that StarkNet is getting out of paying Ethereum ETH for Ethereum layer 1 fees. That they can't get around that. That's impossible. No one can get around that unless there was a change to the Ethereum core protocol to allow that, which there isn't, and there most likely will never be. So I'm not a fan of this because I think it's just like really bad for UX. I don't really understand the need to do this. Like, I mean, I understand why they think they should do this, because it might kind of like drive more value to the token because it gives it more utility, but I actually don't think so. I don't think I kind of like argued this point last week or earlier in the week on the refuel, where I basically said that I don't think fee revenue is like a main driver, or the token being like a fee token is like a main driver of value for things. I obviously think it's got a lot more to do with moneyness and store value and things like that. So yeah, I don't know how much value it would kind of like drive to the token here. I don't think it would drive very much at all, but it is definitely a big UX kind of like a pain, I think. And also kind of like a pain potentially for validators or sequencers or stakers or whatever they are, because of the fact that if they're getting paid in Stark tokens and then they still have to, and the network still has to pay Ethereum layer 1 in ETH, well, then they have to kind of account for that. And there's obviously currency risk there as well, because things can kind of move under you. Obviously, the Stark token would be more volatile than something like ETH, and there's all those kind of like second order effects there. So that's the second thing that I do not like, kind of like about this. And those are basically the two major things there. Overall, like I think it's good that kind of like StarkNet is trying to decentralize, trying to kind of like give ownership over to the community, as much as I don't think they're going to be able to achieve that with their current distribution. But this also kind of like leads me to think that the way I mean, I've always, like, to be honest, I've always felt this a little bit about Starkware since basically, maybe not day one, but really early on. It kind of feels like they're piggybacking off Ethereum and they want to spin out to be their own layer one eventually. So you could imagine something like StarkNet becoming its own layer one, where the Stark token is obviously like any other layer one token. Obviously, I don't think that's a good idea. But I can see it happening with something like Starkware. They haven't really signaled that they're that Ethereum aligned, and they've kind of like done questionable things in the past. Like I've said, remember when I covered their raises and I said I don't understand why they allowed 3 Arrows Capital into the raise and Alameda into the raise. It just didn't make much sense to me. And like, look what happened by letting 3 Arrows Capital in. So they've just been very, I don't know, not as Ethereum aligned as I would like them to be. And that's just kind of like my personal view on things. Maybe I'm wrong here, but just from everything that I've seen, I kind of like don't think I am, unfortunately. But the good news is that Starkware has competitors, right? They're not the only layer 2 team out there, and they're still adding a lot of value regardless. They've built some really, really great tech that's being leveraged by some of the best applications or best kind of like ecosystems in crypto right now. Obviously, Immutable X is built using Starkware's tech and DYDX as well, but I guess like DYDX is kind of like not leaving just yet, but they're obviously doing their Cosmos chain as well. And there's also Diversify and a bunch of other things they're kind of built there. So I don't want this to sound like me being like bearish on StarkNet or Starkware's technology. I'm definitely not. They have really, really great technology, but I am very bearish on this token distribution, and I'm very bearish on their prospects of even decentralizing this thing. Like, compare it to or contrast it with something like Optimism. Like, I think Optimism's token distribution obviously could have probably been better than what it was, but I don't think it's that bad. I think it's actually pretty decent. And also, on top of the token distribution, they have like an entire kind of framework around governance and how they kind of like have these two houses, the token house and the I can't remember the name of the other house, but they have like these two governing houses that kind of like the attempt is basically to mirror the existing systems in the real world and to have things like checks on power and balances of power and stuff like that. So there's this whole massive framework around it where it feels like this decentralization proposal for StarkNet just. Yeah, it's kind of like feels like a bit of an afterthought here. It doesn't feel like it's been thought through very, very quickly. It feels like they definitely kind of like just want to do this to, I guess, obviously get the token out there and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm just not very excited about this. You guys should definitely read all the blog posts yourself. They're not long. Kind of like see what you think about it. But from what I saw on Twitter and what I saw on the Discord channel, people aren't a big fan of this token distribution at all. It does not lend itself to building a good community and decentralization in my eyes anyway. But we'll see. Maybe they prove me wrong. Maybe they never become a layer 1. They stick as an Ethereum layer 2 and they become really, really big and StarkNet becomes awesome. Like, I hope so. But the fact that they're having like StarkNet tokens as a payment token, the fact that their token distribution is horrid, the fact that decentralization of the network seems like an afterthought to them, and the fact that they have really restrictive licensing as well, that's a major reason why DYDX actually is building a Cosmos chain, is because Starkware's tech is very, very restrictive with their licensing. Hopefully that changes over time as well. But yeah, I don't know. I've kind of like, as excited as I am for Starkware's technology and as bullish as I am on their tech, just everything else around it, just, I don't know. It doesn't really gel well with me. I don't really feel like they're going in the right direction, but that's just my personal opinion. As I said, you guys can read this. Maybe let me know your thoughts in the Discord channel or even in the YouTube comments if you'd like there. But yeah, overall, poor token distribution. Don't like the fact that they're forcing users, or they're going to potentially force users to have to use the Stark token to pay fees. It's just like really bad for UX. And just kind of like everything else that's happened as well, it just lately with them just doesn't really inspire much confidence. But anyway, there's a StarkNet token. You may or may not get an airdrop. I don't know when that's going to be. Maybe next year. Doesn't look like it's going to be a big one. So it remains to be seen like what happens here, because obviously StarkNet and Starkware is very, very popular right now. They have a lot of good products people use. People have been looking forward to their token, but like, does the bad token design, bad kind of distribution, and just overall, kind of lackluster decentralization path for Starkware, does that kill off the community that they have right now? And if it does that even matter for their long-term prospects? I don't know. Like, it's too early to tell. But in my eyes, from what I've seen from other projects, it doesn't really make much sense to do this, because if you're killing off your early community, or if you're kind of like making them upset, or I guess like making them less bullish on your project, and that's not really good, right? But anyway, I'm gonna leave it at that because I think I've bashed them enough here. But I think to me, it's just honest criticism at the end of the day. I'm not trying to bash them. I'm not trying to shit on them or anything like that. But I am trying to offer honest criticism of something that I honestly saw, and I felt sad over this. Like honestly, like you guys know I've been covering StarkNet for ages on the channel. I've been really bullish on them. I'm just so sad that they've gone down this path of kind of like just a really bad token distribution and doing really weird things like having it as the fee token and stuff like that. Like, I'm just really sad and disappointed. I'm not like angry or anything like that. It's just kind of like I expected more, I expected better, and I hoped for more. Maybe I shouldn't get my hopes up these days. I don't know. But anyway, as I said, they have competition. So maybe the competition will force them to rethink things. But we'll have to see what happens there. All right, so today the Celsius saga has not come to an end, but basically it's come to the end of the line of where Celsius was going to go. So they announced today that Celsius has filed voluntarily for Chapter 11 protection and announced that the company initiated a financial restructuring. And then they have this whole thread here. I mean, it's not a huge thread, but like a thread here that basically says that they filed for bankruptcy. Now, I think Celsius's on-chain wallet has about $1 billion worth of crypto in it, but I don't think they're going to be able to pay back their customers. Definitely not 100%. I don't know how much money they're going to be able to give back to their customers, but they're definitely not going to make them whole, which is unfortunate because a lot of people use Celsius, a lot of people believed in Celsius, a lot of people held the token, stuff like that, and they gotten burned. This is basically TradFi, guys. This is what happens in TradFi. People just get burned, and the people don't get made whole, and then obviously regulations come in, and they hope it doesn't happen again, but it does happen again, and yeah, it's just a really shitty situation. And I quote-tweeted this and I said, remember when Celsius's CEO was telling everyone it was going to be okay? Stop listening to and trusting centralized entities. It never ends well. And then I continued by saying, I've never been more bullish on the trustless DeFi ecosystem that we're building out on Ethereum. It's needed now more than ever. And I went over this, I think, last week in my little DeFi bullish rant there. So I'm not going to rehash those thoughts here. But I think generally, DeFi is just so misunderstood still. I think people think that DeFi is like all the Ponzi's that we've seen. It's got nothing to do with that in my eyes. It's mostly, almost entirely got to do with the transparency aspect to me. Like, I don't even think I think decentralization is a means to an end when it comes to DeFi. But the most bullish thing for me is that transparency. Because as I mentioned last week, I think it was in one of the episodes, the transparency allows for everyone and anyone in the world to audit the kind of like standing of a protocol and allow you to blow the whistle if something seems wrong. You can't do that with centralized services. It's too hard. And if you do blow the whistle, people will call you a conspiracy theorist because you don't have any evidence to back it up, because it's all circumstantial or it's all kind of like speculation. You can't point to something on chain, for example, and say, hey, this protocol says it's this, but this is actually happening, and like prove it to someone. And it usually, the proof only comes out when something like this happens, when something falls apart. So I think like we need to stop people from, or at least educate people on the fact that stop listening to CEOs and kind of like centralized companies. They're never going to be honest with you or totally honest with you. They're always going to lie in some way or twist their words. They're always going to hide behind their lawyers. Whereas with DeFi protocols, truly decentralized, DeFi protocols, they can't lie to you. They can't put their lawyers in front of you. They're not going to negotiate with you. They're not going to kind of like even speak to you. They're not going to care who you are. But that's the beauty of that system. It's just so different to what we're used to. It really is a paradigm change. And I think a lot of people kind of miss that. And I've seen people, obviously refer to Celsius and BlockFi and Voyager as DeFi, and that hurts my soul. Like, seriously, it hurts my soul when I see people doing that, because it's such an insult to what we're building within DeFi. These platforms are not DeFi at all. They don't embody any aspect of DeFi. And as I've explained before, they may use DeFi as part of their operations. They may use DeFi protocols, but they themselves are not DeFi. As I've explained before in my analogy, they are basically a super centralized entity. It's basically like a single entity that you send funds into, and they do whatever they want with those funds while promising you a yield, for example. And you have no visibility or control over what they do. And then withdrawing your funds is basically an IOU. You have no guarantee of getting your money back. It's same as a bank. Like, people kind of like say, oh, I keep my money in a bank because it's safer there. Okay, maybe if you're in like a developed country, it's relatively safe. Relatively, like I emphasize the relatively there, safe to keep your money in a bank. But the problem is that banks are still very subject to bank runs as well. It's the same kind of like thing. And we're seeing this in China right now where people are trying to get money out and the banks are like, well, no, we don't have the money because the money doesn't just sit in a bank account. The bank does things with it. So that's the exact same thing that these kind of like platforms like Celsius and Voyager and all that did. They took the money like a bank takes the money and they do stuff with the money. They're not just going to sit on it. What use is it just sitting in their vault, in kind of like in their address, for example, in their Ethereum address? What use is cash sitting in a bank account? There's no use to that. Banks have never operated like that. These centralized services will never operate like that because then they can't make money. So the safest place to keep your assets is on yourself. Now, obviously, with fiat currencies, that's extremely hard to do. You can't do it in a digital way. To access the digital fiat system, you have to go through a bank. And doing it with kind of like cash, with notes, is impractical because where are you going to keep all your money? If you've got like a lot of money, you can't just keep it under the mattress or keep it in your house. Like it's very insecure. You're always probably going to be worried about it. And it's just very, very impractical having all that cash all the time. And also, unfortunately, you're going to put a target on your back having that much cash because the tax office will probably kind of like do data matching and see, okay, why doesn't this person have a bank account? It probably looks sus that you don't have a bank account these days, which sucks, but that's the reality of the situation, right? Whereas with crypto, we have this amazing self-sovereignty. We can custody our own assets digitally. We can take, I mean, obviously none of us have $1 billion. I don't think any billionaires watch this show, but you can take billions of dollars wherever you want on a ledger, on a lattice, on a hardware wallet, on 24 words on a piece of paper. That's literally like money that you can access anywhere in the world, take it wherever you want. And you can't do that any other way. Doing it on through the digital fiat system, I mean, good luck. Like, if you want to move $1 billion through the digital fiat system, you have to talk to humans. You have to go through all these middlemen. You have to basically sign things. You have to you basically have to have a direct relationship with the bank to be able to do this. Whereas within Ethereum, Bitcoin, crypto generally, you can move any amount of value you want over the chain, and it's very resistant to censorship. It's obviously not censorship proof. Like, it could be censored if the miners all colluded to censor you or something like that, but it's very censorship resistant. You have strong settlement guarantees, and the security is also very, very strong. And the best part is you don't have to deal with anyone. You can just do it on your own. Like, there's no need to deal with any middlemen, anyone directly, no humans at all. You're just dealing with the chain itself. You're probably, if you're sending $1 billion across the chain, you're going to do a few test transactions. But at the end of the day, you're not dealing with anyone. Obviously, that comes with the trade-off of if anything goes wrong, then it's all on you. If you send $1 billion to the wrong address, well, I'm sorry, you're never getting that back unless that person who owns that address sends it back to you, right? If you send $1 billion to the burn address for some reason, that's gone forever. Like, unless the entire Ethereum network came together to run code that would reverse that transaction, that's just not going to happen, right? So, getting a little bit esoteric here, but I think it's important to understand the trade-offs here and just like what a huge leap it is that we have something like self-sovereign digital, custody of our own assets. So, the fact that we have that just makes me kind of like say this again. Stop putting your money in these services. Like, I'm not trying to give investment advice. You can do with what you want with your money. But if you've seen BlockFi, Voyager, and Celsius, well, okay, BlockFi didn't blow up, but Voyager and Celsius, you saw them blow up. You saw BlockFi go through its issues. You've seen multiple centralized exchanges over the years collapse. You've seen plenty of instances of centralized exchanges being hacked as well. And obviously DeFi suffers from these things too. But like, it's not worth it in my eyes. It's not worth like 5 to 10% yield for a 100% risk of loss of your assets. And it's even higher than it is in DeFi because of the fact that within DeFi, you can at least track your funds, keep track of it. Yes, if the smart contract gets hacked, you could lose your funds or whatever, but you could at least track it. Whereas within CeFi, you have no idea. You just have an IOU, you have a promise. Whereas within DeFi, you can withdraw your funds if you want to. And I'm talking about truly decentralized protocols, like the ones that kind of like have admin keys and stuff like that can change things on you. But yeah, anyway, I'm going to leave it at that because I've rambled on too much there. Just another reminder of why DeFi is just leagues ahead of CeFi and TradFi. Like, it's not even worth comparing the two. It's literally like comparing a horse to a rocket ship. Like, basically, like there's two completely different modes of transport, just like DeFi, CeFi, and TradFi are all completely different modes of kind of like interacting with value and money. All right, so there's been a bit of conversations lately around DOS attacks on Ethereum block proposers post-merge. Now, this has been a kind of like thing that's been talked about for probably years at this stage, and it's basically got to do with the fact that potentially validators can be identified via their IP address, and then they can be targeted in a DOS attack in order to send their validator offline, in order to kind of like prevent them from getting rewards, or sending lots of validators offline to prevent the chain from finalizing, or any of this, or make the chain just unstable in general, or any of these sorts of stuff. This is a sophisticated attack. It's not expected to happen, but it is an attack that can happen. So there's a blog post here from ASN who kind of like thinks through this from first principles and how you can kind of like gain resilience against DOS attacks if you are running your own validator. So if that applies to you, you should definitely give this a read. But in terms of like the longer term solution here, there is something called SSLE. Vitalik proposed this on ETH Research. You can kind of Google SSLE Ethereum Vitalik, and SSLE stands for what is it? Single. God, I can't remember what it stands for. But basically, it fixes this issue. And you can go read why, as I said, by Googling it. But I forget what it actually stands for. I know that the last two letters are a leader election, but I don't think the first was, for some reason I have single slot in my head. I don't think it's that. Maybe I'll quickly Google it so I don't sound like a mumbling idiot right now. If I just Google SSLE, yes, single secret leader election. That's what it is. And Vitalik's kind of like tweet is actually here. Maybe if I just bring that here for you guys to see. His proposal is called Simplified SSLE. It's basically a proposal on ETH Research. Very, very technical. Don't get me wrong. It's nothing that you should be kind of like expecting to understand through the first read through. But I'll actually link this in the YouTube description for you to check out as well, because I've had a few people ask me about this and ask me about this potential attack vector. It does exist. There are solutions in the short term, and there are also solutions in the medium to long term as well. All right, so some big news out of Polygon today. They announced that they are have been chosen to be part of the Disney Accelerator program. And I think they're the only blockchain project to be part of this Accelerator program, I believe. But this is pretty cool. You can kind of like see this here, exactly what it is. And I guess this is Disney's press release, I should say, and these are the basically companies that have been selected or projects that have been selected. And most these are kind of like Polygon's the only blockchain platform, but there are other kind of like Web3 related things. FlickPlay is a Web3 social app. There's InWorld, which is I guess creative entertainment or immersive experiences with AI. Lockerverse, which is a Web3 platform. Obsess, which is using as an experimental 3D commerce platform to create 3D virtual stores. Polygon, obviously, and Red 6, which is an AR company. So a bit of a mix here, which is very, very cool to see. But this is huge news. I mean, Polygon being accepted into the Disney Accelerator as the only blockchain platform to be accepted in, right? Think about how many different platforms there are, from different layer 1s to different layer 2s to side chains, and Polygon was the only one that was accepted here. Pretty awesome news to see. Congrats to them for getting accepted. All right, so some updates for Metamask and mobile today. You can now add popular networks with just 2 clicks. So this is making the user experience of changing networks, so adding new networks to Metamask on mobile a lot easier. Obviously on desktop, it's pretty easy already. If you go to somewhere that is an Optimism app or something like that, and you don't have Optimism on your Metamask, it'll say, hey, add this network to Metamask. It'll automatically prompt you to do that, and then you'll add it in. It'll all be good. And then if you already have Optimism added, you can just click switch network. It'll prompt you to do that and everything's good there. But now you can basically do similar with 2 clicks on Metamask mobile. So if you're a Metamask mobile user, this will be of interest to you. Obviously, you got to update the app, I think. But yeah, definitely do that if you haven't yet. All right, so I came across this just randomly today, this kind of like game here. It's the first time I've heard of it, called The Beacon. And they announced that they will be building on Treasure, which kind of like exists on Arbitrum. And they say, we feel these ecosystems best align with our long-term thesis for Web3 gaming. So I guess I just wanted to highlight that. I don't know really much about this game, but what I wanted to highlight is that more games are being built on Arbitrum, which I find really, really cool. Obviously, gaming, I think, is going to be quite big, for better or worse. Like, I don't know how crypto gaming is going to shake out here. Like, a lot of it right now is just the play to earn stuff, which looks like Ponzi's. But I think longer term, there'll be fun games with just crypto elements built in. And I think the most successful ones will obviously be built within the Ethereum ecosystem, whether that's at a roll-up or a Validium or something else, right? Like, at the end of the day, it can't it doesn't have to be a roll-up, and maybe a roll-up becomes just too expensive for games in general, but it can be like a mutable X's approach, where they're a Validium, right? They store data off-chain, have proofs on-chain still, and it can be very, very scalable like that. So just wanted to put this on your guys' radars. The art looks really cool as well. As I said, I haven't dived too deep into it just yet, but I am planning to, because I am on the hunt for a good crypto game that isn't a Ponzi, right? And that kind of like actually makes sense. So that's why I'm paying attention to crypto gaming, just to try and find something, because you guys know I'm a gamer. I love gaming. Don't do as much these days as I once did, but I definitely love gaming, and I'm curious to see if crypto gaming can actually be a thing and be more than just Ponzi's. All right, so an update from Synthetix today. So they said here, Synthetix is excited to share the SNX 2022 release milestones. Many key features have been released this year, such as Synthetix futures and atomic swaps, and many more are coming, such as future of atomic swaps, Purpose V2, and Synthetix V3. And you can read more in this blog post here. So I think they have like a nice little roadmap item here, and this is basically what their release milestones are for 2022. Some of them have been delivered. More are coming, such as the SUSD Synth Bridge in early August, Purpose V2, no date there, but that's coming in a bunch of, and Synthetix V3 as well, which is really cool. So you can read this. I mean, these updates from Synthetix are always quite comprehensive, basically covers their entire ecosystem, which I think is really, really cool. But I've talked about Synthetix before on the Refuel a fair bit, and I've said that the fact that their ecosystem was finally able to be built out as the original vision that Kane and his early team had is awesome, because it obviously wasn't able to be built out on layer 1 Ethereum for the fact that it just wasn't scalable for them. Fees were very high. They were actually one of the first DeFi protocols to suffer immensely from the high fees, especially SNX staking. So they moved to Optimism, was basically the first project on Optimism, and have been on there ever since, and have been growing ever since, and doing a lot of really great kind of like activity on there, and good fee revenue too, actually. If I go to cryptofees.info, I think, yeah, they're still up there. They're doing kind of like $280,000 of kind of like fees today, and some of those fees go to SNX stakers, guys. Like, this is the difference between kind of like Synthetix and a lot of other DeFi protocols. They've had a fee switch on for basically ever. Like, I think since SNX staking was enabled, essentially. So SNX stakers have always been able to get a share of the fees from the platform, and that is definitely very different to most of the tokens out there these days, right? Like, there's only a select few that actually enable that. So very, very cool to see that. But yeah, anyway, you can give this a read, the blog post. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, so just a quick shout here that tomorrow I'll be doing another kind of like Twitter Spaces with SSV Network as part of the Merge series here. This one will be with Vito from Alchemy. He works as developer relations there. It's going to be a pretty good conversation, I think. We're going to talk about all things developers, Web3 development, kind of like and everything around that sphere. And I'm going to ask him some questions about the Merge, of course, and how Alchemy is handling that. For those of you who don't know, Alchemy is basically an infrastructure provider for Ethereum and other chains, very similar to Infura. So I think it's going to be a really, really great conversation. Looking forward to that. It's going to be at 9 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. You can go check out your local time by checking out the Twitter Spaces. It'll be linked in the YouTube description. You can set a reminder, but if you miss it, there will be a recording, of course. All right, finally here, I just wanted to give a quick shout out that Johnny from the co-founder of Element Finance here, I put out a tweet that said, we're looking for a God tier Solidity dev to join Element Finance so LF doesn't have to deal with me, which I thought was quite funny here. So there's like a little meme here. Let's not merge console log. And then he's got the meme here of Cartman saying, but ma'am, I still have that ingrained in my head, him saying that. But yeah, if that sounds like you, if you're a Solidity developer and you're looking for a new team to join, Element Finance is up there with the kind of like top tier teams in the industry, especially in Ethereum DeFi. So definitely kind of get in contact with them, or kind of like, I guess, DM Johnny here for a chance to work at Element Finance. And I think on that note, that's going to be it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.